Where we are as an African continent when it comes to corruption, 43% of Africans live below the poverty line. But get this, $50 billion in asset recovery, or in assets, is outside of the African continent. So where do we even begin with this conversation? But before we can get into that nitty-gritty conversation, that juicy conversation, we want to take a look at some of the stories making headlines on the local papers.
Let's first introduce our guests like good hosts, and then we get into the newspaper review, beginning from my immediate left, Caroline Gaita. Thank you so much for coming in. She's Executive Director, Mzalendo Trust, Asante Sana. Judith Shamala, Senior Attorney, Civil Litigation and Asset Recovery at EACC.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming in. The man who needs no introduction, Samuel Kimewe, Executive Director, Transparency International. Asante Sana for coming in. And Muthoni Kimani, Director, Assets Recovery Agency. Asante Sana for coming in as well. So let's start with the standard today. MCA's Senate back one-term president. So the Punguza Mizigo Initiative is saying that to introduce a 7-year term presidency, reduce the number of MPs from the current 416 to 147, elect one man and one woman from each of the 47 counties to the National Assembly, abolish nominations in county assemblies and the Senate, elevate Senate to be the upper house with veto powers, increase counties' revenue to 35% from 15%, replace CDF with the ward funds, life sentence for culprits guilty of corruption, and abolish position of deputy governor. Let's take a look at point 8, life sentence for culprits guilty of corruption. But before we get into that, Sam, will this help in the fight against corruption?
Good morning. Not necessarily. I think we've got to look at the numbers that we are dealing with. The concern of the Punguza Mzigo is about the number of our representatives. But if you look at the cost of our representatives vis-a-vis the entire budget and also the amount of money that is lost through waste and corruption, it really fades out. Yeah. It's a matter that is worth revisiting, but it's not a game changer in my view.
So you don't think fewer people in positions where they can pilfer public funds will help in any way?
No, it's not going to help. We should be dealing with the pilferage. Yeah. And pilferage can be done by a few people or many people. And at the moment, it's being done by very many people. And there is no guarantee that a fewer number of people without any stronger safeguards will perform any better.
Okay. Yeah. Judith, legally, how hard would it be to achieve this point 8, life sentence for culprits guilty of corruption?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I don't think it would be pretty hard to achieve that. It would take an amendment to the law as it is, because the sentence is up to the minimum. Yeah. But then the point is the law must be amended first, but I do not think that it will be very hard to achieve it.
Yeah. So legally this can actually be achieved?
It can be achieved, and I think it can go into a long way into fighting corruption by making the sentences stiffer than they are right now.
All right.
All right, Muthoni, let me rope you into the conversation as well. So here, Aukot has 1 million signatures. The EACC is looking into them to see if they are credible and viable. But then the biggest question is, how is it that we balance representation vis-a-vis over-representation? Everyone feels they should be represented. Every tribe in Kenya, every religion, every, for example, people living with disabilities, women need to be represented, youth need to be represented, etc. How do we strike that balance between representation and over-representation?
Thank you very much. I think the balance striking the balance between representation and under-representation is something that I think the country needs to interrogate and understand, that you can't have everybody being represented. What you need is to ensure that when you are sharing the national resources, when you are dealing with national services, giving services to the people, they're accessible to the people so that they feel they're part of government. The challenge is that people want, if it is your tribe that is ruling, then that is the president. Then you say it's our government, as opposed to being the Kenyan people's government. I think what we need to do is to relook at the way we have, of course, after 2010, the entire infrastructure changed. The whole idea about development, the whole idea about devolution changed the infrastructure. I think the fruits have not yet been realized because, of course, there have been challenges in terms of how we implemented devolution and how we set up the institutions. But largely, in my view, a lot has been achieved in terms of the devolution agenda in Kenya. We have seen places in Kenya which never felt like they were part of Kenya now getting services, and probably with time, I think before we think about having everybody represented, with time we should be able to see the fruits of devolution, which will change this country, and of course, with regard to the other.
Right. Caroline, but then the other thing is that if this referendum goes through, that means a lot of the politicians that we are seeing today who have already done their 2-term limits will have a chance to run again.
It's a clean slate.
It's a recycle of our political leaders. Where does that leave voters, you and I, Kenyans?
Okay, first of all, I would probably go back to where we clamored for a new constitution and what the positions as are reflected in the current constitutions were trying to cure. Why did we feel that we needed this sort of representation? There was an issue of national outlook, there was an issue of equity and equality within representation, because there was the issue of devolution and making sure that service delivery especially gets to the people. So the question is, why haven't we achieved what we sought out to achieve? When we say we have the most progressive constitution, is it the constitution or is it the people that we put into office? I want to believe that it's the people that we have put into the office, which then takes us to the quality of leadership and not the quantity. I think that's our problem.
Quality, not quantity.
Quality and not the quantity. I think that's our problem. And so, coming back to your question, we would be opening up a Pandora's box. And I think as Kenyans, we must really be cautious as to what this whole constitutional reform is trying to achieve, and whether it is in Wanjiko's interest or in the political class interest. Because like you rightly put it, we open a new slate. You can run for office. If you are president, you can still say I was president within the older presidential limits. If I was a governor, I could still go back for governor. And so those are some of the things that I feel that we need to come out clearly and say, what is it that we are trying to cure as we address the constitutional reforms? Because not everything in the constitution is bad. Is it over-representation? Why are we over-represented? Is it in terms of budget, like some rightfully puts it? How much are we paying our leaders vis-a-vis how much are we losing to corruption? And those, for me, I think are the pertinent questions that we need to be asking.
Okay.
Yeah.
Judith, I want to bring your attention to the story still on the front page of the Daily Nation. Former EACC director faces 89 million shillings probe. So Ms. Jennifer Kimani, a former finance director, is at the center of investigations by the watchdog over payments she made while working for the Kenya Rural Roads Authority. So without getting into the merits of the case, because I believe this is an active case,
Yes.
How can an institution tasked with fighting graft be effective when some of their own are implicated in the war, in the fight against graft in itself?
Let me put it this way. First, this was brought to light. She was working way before she came to EACC. The intelligence reached us just the other day. The matter was looked into, and this, Trevor, shows that no one is actually exempt. And this will, the fight against corruption is not selective. It will go deep into the root, even to the people who are working in EACC. That if you're found where you are working or currently working right now to be involved in corruption, you will be prosecuted.
Doesn't that then mean there's a loophole? Because we've been pushing for lifestyle audits and all that, but you said that she was working in a different place before she came to EACC. You did not flag it before she came.
This doesn't go to lifestyle audit. For lifestyle audits, it will come out in the way you live your life in terms of expenditure, which is quite different if you engage in corruption in respect to maybe forgery, payments that were made. That is very different from lifestyle audits.
Okay.
Yes.
Sam, what do you think? The same institution tasked with fighting corruption having some of its own.
Yeah, well, I think it's a bad thing for that to happen. But truth be told, there is actually no place that is immune to corruption. And I think we should not be looking for such spaces because they don't exist. what we should be looking for is strengthening mechanisms to deal with such incidences when they come up in a convincing, conclusive manner.
So
that's what separates an ethical institution from an institution that doesn't care.
So are Kenyans rather supposed to have confidence in the same institutions that are supposed to fight corruption?
Indeed. If the institutions show consistently that they don't tolerate corruption within their ranks, then Kenyans will have confidence in them. But there is no institution that is immune from corruption in this country or elsewhere.
Okay.
Maybe just to add on that,
Yes.
the fact that the EACC actually picked it and ran with it, and as we speak, it's just that I cannot speak much into it because it's a live case. The fact that this file has gone to the DPP, I think it's a plus for EACC. It shows that there are no separate cows, isn't it?
Okay.
Yes, thank you. I think one of the things that we've been grappling with is the question of vetting of officers tasked with the responsibility of fighting corruption and economic crimes. I think we are thinking about a mechanism of continuous vetting as opposed to a one-off where you get into office, so that we have proper in-depth vetting of the officer, including the associates, like they do it in terms of other developed countries. That's an area where you know, it's not just about the one-off where you do a polygraph this year. It's a structure and a system that will be able to tell us who is Muthoni. What has she done before she came here? What is she doing now that she's involved in these very complex cases, which are life-threatening as well? So that's the way we are thinking about in terms of the MAT arrangement.
Okay. Let me bring your attention to another story that perhaps still cuts across us as Kenyans, as parents, etc. It's the story on the Daily Nation back page is where you will find it. Report identifies the cause of unrest. We've seen stories in and out, year in, year out, of unrest in high schools, destruction of property and arsons as well. But the question then is, yesterday still on one of the local daily newspapers, is that there's a suggestion to bring back spies into secondary schools, not this time for political gain, but to keep an eye on any criminal activities. Judith, will this work?
I think it's a yes and no answer. First of all, it's I think studies have been done as to why we have school unrests. Instead of having spies, my opinion would be we go back to those reports, get to the very root of what is ailing our children before we take that drastic measure of having spies in schools. Then we deal with it, and not just deal with the symptoms, but deal with the root cause of all this unrest.
You know, some of it is being blamed on the parents. Very little communication with your own children in terms of what they're thinking, what they're looking at, what is bothering them, because it's always hassle. You're always going out to work, coming back late. What do you think, Carol?
Well, I think it's a cosmetic response because, truth be told, most of us are parents, and even our parents brought us up when they had to hustle. The hustle might not have been the same in the current era of technology and everything else, but they did work, and most of us turned out okay. So I think we are not addressing the issues that are affecting the kids in the school and relating. We hear cases of not enough funds to, for example, deal with issues of overpopulation in schools, quality and quantity of food, and the quality of facilities within schools, and we are not addressing how this affects the schools themselves. And then the issue of communication, there might be the issue of the communication between the parents and the kids, for example, but how about within the school communities? If you see schools that have managed to maneuver through some of these issues, they have proper communication systems between the students and the teachers, the students and the prefects. They have what I would call proper governance processes that are inclusive, that are participatory within the school communities. And so for me, I think what we need to be talking about is how do we make sure that our boys and girls, especially when they go to high school, from the moment they report, they have a process and a system of reporting any issues or any problems that they may face, whether from their fellow students, from their teachers, and so that we don't now start putting up these plaster cosmetic solutions at the end, when dormitories have burnt, when kids have been beaten and they're in hospital, when kids have, you know, run amok and ran out of school, but we address them within the school systems.
And Samuel, let me pick it up from that point by Caroline. Have we as a society, and in this scenario, I mean specifically parents and teachers, have we as a society led down this generation? Because you don't wake up tomorrow and decide to burn your dormitory or to bully a student, a fellow student. Have we let them down?
Well, I think that there's a lot that has changed in the way, in the dynamics of society, and I agree to some extent that the hustle and bustle of today's life, particularly in urban centers, has a big role to play. You know, you leave in the morning before the kids go to school, or they wake up very early and go to school, and you come back when they are asleep. If that's the case, as I see in many of our societies in this city, then there is bound to be a problem, because then parenting has to be a very deliberate effort to look into. But remember, teachers also spend a significant part of their time with children, and therefore I think between the parent and the teachers, we have to see how children are mentored, but also their voices and views heard when they speak out and raise concerns. But I also think that we have a systemic problem in our public education system that we have to face. And I think despite all the efforts around a new curriculum and a lot of other things, there is really a need for us to have a conversation as to what kind of education system that we need for this country. At the moment, I am personally not convinced that we are on the right path.
Muthoni, we need to take a commercial break, but I want you to have the last say on this conversation.
Yes, I entirely agree with what my colleagues are saying. I think in terms of quality time, what quality time do parents have with their children? Is it when you take them to the mall, or is it when you're just showing off to them, or is it when you're harassing them to work hard? You know, it gets down to the children of today. I can't say the child of today is my generation. My generation, we didn't even notice that our mothers were working so hard because we were also working very hard ourselves. I think what we need to think about, this antisocial behavior which is setting in slowly everywhere, we need to look at our society deeper and see what is ailing us. What can we do as a society to bring back that cohesiveness of where you have children who go to school and feel like they're students, not want to be grown-ups before their time, and then you also have parents who actually give quality time to their children. Not whether they are the urban ones or whether they are the rural ones, they should be having quality time where the children feel confident. When they have issues, they'll be able to raise it with the parent and also raise it with the teachers. In our times, our teachers are like our mothers. They were actually, before we went to our mother, we went to the teacher as well, because our mothers were too busy working. So that, I would say, is that opening that communication channel will take some time, and of course, it's not something that can be done by, in my view. Personally, I don't think a spy can solve the problem that we have.
All right, let's take a quick break here on Daybreak. When we come back, we delve into that conversation on the war on graft. Just a day to the African Anti-Corruption Day. The theme this year is towards a common African position on asset recovery. We'll find out what are the biggest impediments when it comes to asset recovery, how much has been recovered so far. I have some statistics here and some figures. We'll also be showing you some reports that were done by Transparency International also. And also a Global Corruption Perception Index, the latest, shows that Kenya dropped a point to 27 in the Global Corruption Perception Index. We'll run some of those facts and figures on the sides of your screens in just a bit, but also I'd like to know from you, what do you think is the biggest impediment in the war against graft? We've been talking about this forever now. In fact, in the last 5 years, we've just ranked between 25 and 28.
So where are the efforts?
Yes. Are they bearing any fruit? That is the main conversation we're going to have in just a bit. And also, we'll find out from them what they think are the biggest challenges and how they can be sorted out as well. That in just a bit. Use the hashtag Daybreak. I see some of your feedback already coming in. We'll read some of them at Trevor Mbija, at Zinzi K, at Citizen TV Kenya. Hashtag is Daybreak. SMS line 224222. You can also call in live 0719 777 777. We'll sample some reviews during this broadcast. Stay with us.